Welcome to another episode of Serial Killer Files by Skoob. I'm your host, Arthur Morgan, and today we're diving deep into one of the most chilling cases in American criminal history. A case that involves cryptic scorecards, brutal murders, and a killer who walked among us with a smile. This is the story of Randy Kraft, better known as the Scorecard Killer. Picture this. It's a quiet night on a California freeway. Officers Sterling and Sergeant Howard are patrolling when they spot something unusual. A Toyota weaving erratically between lanes, occasionally veering onto the shoulder. The vehicle is traveling dangerously, making illegal lane changes that scream of impaired driving. When they finally signal for a stop, something odd happens. The car doesn't immediately pull over. Instead, it continues along the road, gradually slowing from 45 miles per hour to 30, as if the driver is buying time. Sterling uses his spotlight to peer into the vehicle and witnesses something peculiar. The driver reaching into the back seat, grabbing a dark jacket, and casually tossing it onto the passenger seat. Finally, the car stops adjacent to a guardrail. What happens next defies normal drunk driving protocol. The driver doesn't wait for the officers to approach. He emerges and walks briskly toward the patrol car. Sterling, with nearly 5,000 drunk driving arrests under his belt, knows this isn't typical behavior. As he later recalled, they usually have an open container, typically an open beer can. And indeed, Randy Kraft had exactly that. A full cooler of Moosehead Lager kept chilled with ice, and he discarded a half-empty beer bottle onto the pavement as he stepped out. But there was something else odd about this 38-year-old computer analyst from Long Beach. During the field sobriety test, Sterling noticed Kraft's jeans were unzipped except for the top button. Kraft confessed to consuming 3 or 4 drinks but insisted he wasn't intoxicated. Sterling's assessment? He wasn't drunk by any means, but he was under the influence. He seemed like someone who overrated his ability to drink and drive home safely. As Sterling handcuffed Kraft, Sergeant Howard made a discovery that would change everything. There was someone else in the car, motionless in the passenger seat. When Howard knocked on the window to get the passenger's attention, there was no response. What they found was the body of Terry Gambrell, a 25-year-old Marine, strangled with a belt. This wasn't just a DUI stop anymore. This was the beginning of one of the most horrific serial killer investigations in American history. The arrest of Randy Kraft on May 14th, with bail set at $250,000, was just the tip of the iceberg. When Detective White and investigator Sidebotham began searching Kraft's vehicle, they uncovered evidence that would haunt them for years to come. Beneath the driver's side floor mat, tucked away like a macabre treasure, was an envelope containing 47 color photographs. These weren't vacation snapshots or family memories. These were images of young men in various states of undress, some clothed, others naked, and several appearing lifeless. One photograph particularly caught Sidebotham's attention. A nude young man lying across a couch with a vivid floral pattern, his eyes empty and staring directly at the camera, mouth agape in a haunting manner. Other subjects seemed merely asleep, but their military-style haircuts and similar physical builds to Kraft created an unsettling pattern. The blood evidence told its own story. The passenger seat where Gambrell had been found was saturated with blood. But here's the chilling detail. It couldn't have been Gambrell's blood. There were no open wounds on the deceased Marine. This blood belonged to someone else entirely. But the most significant discovery was yet to come. In the trunk, investigators found a briefcase containing a wood-grained binder with a tablet that would earn Kraft his notorious nickname. This tablet contained 61 enigmatic entries beginning with cryptic labels like stable, angel, EDM, and harikari, and concluding with terms like England, oil, Dart 405, and what you got. 4 of these notations were marked as 2 and 1, suggesting that if Cy Botham's theory was correct, Randy Stephen Kraft may have claimed 65 lives, making him one of the most prolific serial killers in American history. The process of deciphering Kraft's so-called scorecard became one of the most complex criminal investigations of the 1980s. Prosecutor Brian Brown began using the term scorecard to describe this document during the trial, with each line representing a victim or sometimes a pair of victims. The decoding process was like solving a sinister puzzle. 7 entries began with Portland, specifically Portland, Portland, Denver, Portland Blood, Portland, Hawaii, Portland Reserve, Portland Head, and Portland Eck. Oregon State Police were able to connect these notations to 6 unsolved murders of young hitchhikers along Interstate 5, just south of Portland. The case of Michael O'Fallon, labeled as Portland, Denver, occurred in summer 1980. Tragically, the entry marked simply as Portland remains an unresolved mystery to this day. One of the most disturbing entries was GR2, corresponding to the deaths of Dennis Alt and Chris Schoenborn from Grand Rapids, Michigan. They died together in December 1982, shortly after sharing drinks with Kraft at the Amway Grand Hotel bar. This entry was among 4 containing the numeral 2, indicating double murders. The complexity of this investigation cannot be overstated. Investigators had to meticulously match bodies or missing persons to characteristics, locations, or keywords linked to these death list notations. It was comparable to solving the New York Sunday Times acrostic, but with far darker implications. Lynn Weirman, who employed Kraft in 1973 and introduced him to computing, offered an intriguing theory. She speculated that these entries might represent names of data files within IBM Business Computer Systems. Since Kraft didn't own a personal computer, she theorized he may have hidden these files at his workplaces or stored them on floppy disks. While law enforcement found this theory interesting, no public confirmation of discovered murder files has ever been made. 6 years after Kraft's arrest, investigators had solved roughly 2/3 of this deadly puzzle. Out of 61 entries, 41 were linked to the deaths of 43 young men killed between 1971 and 1983. However, 20 entries remained unresolved, each carrying the haunting phrase, "name unconnected," to any unsolved murder. Who was Randy Stephen Kraft when he wasn't killing? On the surface, he appeared to be an educated, successful man with a degree in economics. He had even served briefly in the Air Force before being discharged over issues related to his sexual orientation, a common occurrence in that era. From June 1980 to January 1983, Kraft worked for an aerospace company based in Santa Monica, taking trips to facilities in Oregon and Michigan. These business trips coincided suspiciously with unresolved murders in both states, painting a picture of a killer who used his professional life as cover for his deadly activities. But Kraft had a longer history with law enforcement. In 1966, he was arrested for lewd conduct, and in 1975 for indecent behavior with another man, resulting in a 5-day jail stint. These early encounters with the law hinted at the darkness that would later consume him entirely. The search of Kraft's Long Beach residence at 824 Roswell Avenue revealed additional disturbing evidence. Photographs of 3 young men whose deaths remained unsolved across Southern California were discovered, adding to the mounting evidence against him. What made Kraft particularly dangerous was his ability to blend into society. He maintained relationships, held steady employment, and by all outward appearances seemed like a normal, even pleasant individual. This facade allowed him to continue his killing spree for over a decade. The autopsy reports painted a horrific picture of what Kraft's victims endured. Dr. Walter Fisher, a distinguished pathologist at the Orange County Coroner's Office, provided testimony that left even seasoned journalists shaken. Terry Gambrell's death resulted from anoxia caused by ligature strangulation. The ligature was likely the very belt Gambrell had been wearing when he left his military base, the same belt found on the back seat of Kraft's car. Small hemorrhages in Gambrell's eyes, eyelids, and cheeks provided clear evidence of oxygen deprivation. But Gambrell's death, while tragic, was relatively straightforward compared to other victims. The case of Mike Inderbeaton, a 21-year-old truck driver from Long Beach, represents one of the most disturbing examples of Kraft's brutality. Fisher described Inderbeaton's autopsy as one of the most unsettling he had ever performed. The victim had suffered emasculation, the removal of both testicles and scrotum, along with injury to the penis. The profuse bleeding indicated these injuries occurred while he was still alive. Additionally, there was evidence of rectal damage suggesting impalement by a large object. Even more disturbing were the round burn marks on Inderbeaton's nipples. When questioned about their cause, Fisher identified them as burns likely inflicted by a cigarette lighter, drawing parallels to similar marks he had seen on a previous murder victim, a child. The systematic nature of these injuries suggests Kraft didn't simply kill his victims, he tortured them. The evidence points to prolonged suffering, indicating these weren't crimes of passion, but calculated acts of sadism. Kraft managed to delay his trial for 5 years through legal maneuvers. But when it finally commenced, it became one of the longest murder trials in California history, stretching for 13 months. He was officially charged with 16 murders, but suspected in as many as 51 more. During the penalty phase, his defense team took an unprecedented approach. Since Kraft refused psychological testing, maintaining his innocence and arguing there was no basis for evaluation, his attorney enlisted Dr. Monte Buchsbaum, a professor at UC Irvine and leading figure in psychiatry. Dr. Buchsbaum had initially performed an EEG test on Kraft in 1984, which returned normal results. However, EEGs can only detect major brain disorders like tumors or epilepsy, not emotional disorders. Buchsbaum then employed the more advanced positron emission tomography, PET scanning technology. The results were remarkable. Kraft's PET scans revealed subdued electrical activity in the frontal lobes, responsible for decision-making and judgment, and abnormally heightened activity in the temporal lobes, associated with emotion, impulse control, and sex drive. This indicated an imbalance between underactive planning functions and overactive emotional systems. To substantiate his findings, Buchsbaum conducted identical PET scans on 24 volunteers from UC Irvine. Less than 5% of the population would present a PET scan as abnormal as Kraft's. Buchsbaum theorized that Kraft's childhood accident, which rendered him unconscious, might have caused unrecognized brain trauma, leading to his later behavior. However, this scientific evidence couldn't save Kraft from his fate. In May 1989, he was convicted on all charges, and after a 4-month penalty phase, he received the death sentence on November 29th. Randy Kraft's story didn't end with his conviction. His life on San Quentin's death row revealed yet another layer to this complex and disturbing individual. Rather than spending his time in isolation and reflection, Kraft engaged in activities that seemed almost mundane, given the gravity of his crimes. He played bridge with fellow serial killers, Douglas Clark and Lawrence Bittaker, creating a macabre social circle of some of America's most notorious murderers. He also played games with William Bonin until Bonin's execution in 1996, maintaining these relationships right up until the end. Perhaps most telling of his character, Kraft became known for filing frivolous lawsuits from his cell. His most notable legal action was a $60 million libel case against the publisher and author of a book detailing his crimes, claiming it unjustly depicted his character. This lawsuit revealed a man who, even after conviction for multiple murders, was more concerned with his public image than showing any remorse for his victims. These actions on death row paint a picture of someone completely disconnected from the reality of his crimes and their impact on others. While families of his victims continued to suffer, Kraft occupied himself with games and legal battles over his reputation. The Randy Kraft case left an indelible mark on law enforcement, the legal system, and our understanding of serial killers. The investigation techniques developed to decode his scorecard became templates for future cases involving organized killers who kept records of their crimes. The case also highlighted the importance of interjurisdictional cooperation. Kraft's crimes spanned multiple states and numerous local jurisdictions. The coordinated effort between Orange County Sheriff's Office, Los Angeles County Sheriff's Office, and police departments from Seal Beach, Long Beach, and other cities in the area Beach and Garden Grove became a model for future investigations. Dr. Fisher's tragic suicide 2 years after his testimony serves as a stark reminder of the psychological toll these cases take on everyone involved. Even seasoned professionals like Fisher, who had performed thousands of autopsies, could be deeply affected by the brutality they witnessed. The case raised important questions about the nature of evil and the factors that create serial killers. Kraft's brain scans suggested biological abnormalities, but countless people suffer brain injuries without becoming killers. The intersection of biology, psychology, and choice in criminal behavior remains hotly debated. Perhaps most importantly, the Kraft case demonstrated the vulnerability of young men, particularly those in military service or those hitchhiking, a common practice in the 1970s and early 1980s. Many of his victims were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, encountering a predator who appeared friendly and normal. The story of Randy Kraft, the Scorecard Killer, is one of America's darkest. Convicted of 16 murders and suspected in many more, Kraft hid monstrosity behind a calm, ordinary life. His cryptic scorecard still holds 20 unresolved entries, haunting clues like 2-in-1 MKV to PL and 2-in-1 hitch that suggest victims remain unidentified. If this case chills you, no help is available. If you have information on unsolved crimes, contact local authorities. Curious about what the cryptic notes really mean? In the extended episode, we unpack evidence, timelines, and interviews that didn't make the broadcast and reveal leads that could still matter. Download Skoob app now to get access to the full story. Listen to the extended episode for documents, unheard testimony, and deeper reporting.